It is McCartney Green. We're getting ready to read Chapter 5 of DND number 1, A Healing in Jesus' Name. And just let me remind you, if you go to my website at mccartneygreen.org or injesusnamemanuals.org, they both take you to the same website, there is a photo album. Just go to the photo album tab, and I had loads of fun making AI pictures using Midjourney to make pictures of the characters that are in the book. So you can see my version of it. I hope it coincides with your version of how they look. Also, there's a very special part of the website. It's an exclusive word that I received from Jesus when he told me why he would send an angel to have me write these books. I couldn't understand what was the big deal. Aren't they just some entertaining series of books? But he told me completely different. And that is also exclusive, a word from Jesus on my website. So I hope you do that. Here we go for Chapter 5. Having tossed and turned all night from the anticipation of what her first training day would bring, Shelley rose groggily to begin her day at 5:30 in the morning. By 6 o'clock, she stood dressed and ready in front of the mirror. "Oh, yeah, ya blend," she mimicked from the old movie, My Cousin Vinny. The studio was only 20 minutes away, and she didn't want to get there too early and sit in a dark parking lot, so she figured she had over 30 minutes to kill. Should I eat breakfast or do a quick meditation to help calm my nerves?" she mumbled as she perused the fridge. Deciding she was too edgy to eat, she went with the meditation. Shelley sat in the living room chair and closed her eyes, letting her mind clear like she'd been taught at the Y. Taking deep, slow breaths, she then tensed, then relaxed each part of her body until she began to relax and feel calm. And when she opened her eyes again, she realized that she'd drifted off to sleep. Slowly, she sat up, glancing at the clock to see if it was yet time to leave. She blinked, and then blinked again, hard. "Oh, no, this can't be true," she cried aloud. She dove for her purse and pulled out her cell phone. 7:30. No! She rose and grabbed her keys. No, I can't believe I've done this. Oh, how could I let this happen? In a panic, she grabbed her bag and purse and ran out the door. She drove madly to the studio, flew into a parking space, and bounded out of her car. Glancing at Master Kino through the window, she swallowed hard and went in. Eric, seated at a desk in the reception area with documents and papers scattered in front of him, didn't bother to look up when his student finally arrived. He continued writing for several moments as Shelley crept in and sat quietly in the chair, positioned directly in front of the desk. When he set the pen down and regarded her, his plan to royally chew her out was spoiled. Pitiful. That was the word that came to mind as he studied her. Her eyes wide, her brow furrowed, her ponytail fell loose to one side, and were those tear tracks on her cheeks? Yes, she was pitiful, and so was he for not being able to bring himself to reprimand her. His harsh look vanished as he accepted that fact. "Are we having a bad day?" "I am so sorry I'm late," she began. "I think I've heard those same words from you before." When she appeared confused, he qualified. "They were the first words I ever heard you speak. Only, I think you were attempting to explain why you were running in the lobby at the tournament." "Is this going to be like a regular thing?" he asked, trying hard to appear cross. A look of agony crossed her face. "No, really, it's not. You see, I was ready, but..." "Please don't explain," he jumped in, finally remembering that his pity wouldn't help her down the road. He needed to establish his authority quickly, so she understood what he expected. There would be no breaks, not for a marked competitor. "No excuses," he said. "Just be on time, every time, from now on." "Yes, Master Kino," she shot back, her tone edging on sarcasm. And Eric's brows rose. She had the good sense to lower her eyes. I'm sorry. Sometimes the rebel in me rears up." He nodded with a smile. "I like it. It shows spunk." He grabbed a clipboard. "So let's get started. I'll need your signature on this release. Later, there are some medical forms to fill out. Even though we covered the important questions at dinner the other night, I need it in writing." "Okay, follow me." Shelley sighed as they stopped at the ever-hated scale. She held her breath and watched as Eric's brown fingers moved the weights back and forth. 113 and 1/2, he wrote. Shelley smiled. Her little fast had paid off, and she lost over 2 pounds. He measured her height and frowned as he wrote 5 feet, 5 inches. Too short or too tall? She asked. What do you mean? You were frowning. Oh, was I? He smiled. Neither one. Too light for your height. It indicates a lack of muscle. From here on out, you're an athlete, not a fashion model. Now she frowned. Eric grabbed the tape measure hanging by the scale and began measuring each part of Shelley's body, starting at her neck. Moving down, he measured upper arms, forearms, shoulders, upper chest, bust, waist, upper hips, upper thighs, lower thighs, calves, and ankles, and by the time he finished recording the last numbers, he couldn't help but notice her pink cheeks. Don't be embarrassed, he said calmly. We're going to be working closely together, so you might as well get used to it. They moved to the weight room, where Eric led her through a series of stretches, and next, beginning with the bench, he had her max out on every single piece of equipment, recording the maximum amount of weight she could lift, push, or pull. She pushed herself as hard as she could, trying to impress him, but by the time they finished, her legs were shaking, and she could barely lift her arms from her sides. Feeling as if she'd fall over if she moved, she looked closely at her teacher as he spoke. She was having a difficult time hearing, mostly because of the buzzing in her ears. He was saying something about not wanting to push her too hard before she had her doctor's exam on Wednesday. It seemed to Shelley he was talking in slow motion. He told her they would take a break and get some water. She was looking pale. She dutifully followed him back to the front of the studio where the water cooler awaited, but she only made it halfway. She must not have actually passed all the way out because she was vaguely aware of things going on around her. Strong arms lifting her from the floor and laying her on a couch in another room. She felt a cool cloth on her forehead, and she opened her eyes to a very concerned face. He smiled at her with such kindness, it was difficult to believe it was the same face that seemed so hard and cross earlier. He placed his fingers on the side of her throat and stared at his watch and then looked into her eyes. Talk to me. Shelley spoke softly. I feel so silly. I don't understand what could have happened. Nothing like this has ever happened before? No, I've always been extremely healthy. Eric's eyes were thoughtful. Well, what did you have for breakfast? I haven't eaten, she answered timidly. He sighed. Okay. Well, then what about last night? What did you have for dinner? Could you possibly have eaten something spoiled? I didn't eat last night either. I haven't eaten since early yesterday. Scowling, Eric stood and placed his hands on his hips. He walked away from her, then turned abruptly. Though his brow was furrowed, he spoke softly. Okay, listen up, Shelley. You are now an athlete in training, and you will absolutely never skip a meal unless I tell you to do so. Not only that, you might as well know that as part of the training, you will eat what I tell you to eat, buy the brand of foods I tell you to buy, and you will even cook how I tell you to cook. There will be no exceptions. Is that clear? He stood over her, waiting for an answer. Very clear, she said softly. Eric had expected another sarcastic retort, and when he didn't get one, he realized she was still feeling puny. Lie here. I'll be right back. I'm going to lock the studio door behind me. Don't let anyone in. He freshened the cloth on her head before he left. And by the time he'd returned, he'd drifted off to sleep. She'd drifted off to sleep. He stood in the doorway to the dressing room where he'd carried her earlier and gazed at her still form. She's going to be a difficult one, he thought. It would help if he could figure her out, but she's like several people rolled into one. He shook his head. She's childlike and womanly, weak and strong, timid and bold. Then again, he absolutely knew better than to try to put a label on anyone. Quietly, he knelt beside her and started to wake her, but halted midway. There was something about watching someone sleep that tugged at the heart. Her brow was furrowed, her mouth pouted. There was an attraction, he admitted to himself. He allowed himself the indulgence of reaching out and touching her lips with the pad of his thumb. Incredible pleasure took him by surprise. Years of self-discipline was the only thing holding him back from stealing a kiss. Luckily for him, she stirred at his touch, and he stood back and watched her awaken. Smiling up at him, she rose to a sitting position. Are you feeling better? He asked. Much better. Well, we can't move on until you've eaten something, so I want you to eat this. He presented her with a tray holding half a banana, half an orange, 1 piece of whole wheat bread, a jar of honey, and a cup of herbal tea. She wrinkled her nose and shook her head. I know I need to eat, but I don't think I can. I'm a little queasy. Well, you just told me that you were feeling much better. She grimaced, and so did he. Now was as good a time as any to initiate her to his teaching methods. He put on a stern face. Better or not? Which is it? She looked up at him, showing an instant of fear, anger, then finally resolution. I'm still not feeling very well. Well, then why did you say otherwise? He pressed, eyebrows raised. I guess I hated looking like a weak, whiny female. He nodded. Good. That's an honest answer. You'll learn over this year to be honest with yourself, and to do that, you must also be honest with others. However, Shelley, let me just say that you don't appear weak. You passed out because your blood sugar's low. Simple science. Here. He sat down next to her and dipped a spoon in the honey and then into the tea. Stirring until the honey had dissolved completely, lifting the cup, he handed it to her. She wrinkled her nose and shook her head. He was not deterred. Just try, he coaxed. Slowly, she took a small sip, waited to see if it would stay down, and nodded her head. He then offered her a slice of banana. She chewed it slowly and smiled. I really do feel a little better now. Good. Then, as soon as you finish everything on this tray, we can get on with our day. Everything? Yes, everything. He took the spoon, dipped it into the honey again, this time spreading it on the piece of bread. There, he commanded, every single crumb. He rose from the couch and stood over her. I'll be back. She watched him leave the room and had to giggle. Terminator, she whispered. When he returned, she followed him through the weight room into a large room lined with mirrors, where a punching bag hung from the ceiling near the far wall. Since you've just eaten, we won't do anything strenuous. We'll just see how flexible you are. He led her through a series of stretches to loosen her up, and once she was warm, he began pushing her legs, knees, and hips this way and that to see how far they would go. He made notes every few minutes. Shelley was dying to see what he was writing about her. Whatever it was, she knew he was disappointed that she couldn't do a side split. He shook his head. No side split, no side kick. Work on it every day, morning and night. Flexibility is priority. Yes, master, she quipped mockingly, letting him know that she really did feel better. Over the course of the day, he tested her extensively. He had her demonstrate every form she knew and made notes about incorrect positions and lack of hip rotation. He called out names of kicks, and she'd do her best to show what she'd learned thus far. When she was unsure of how to execute one, he'd demonstrate. There is no kick that is unimportant, he explained. Every kick is crucial, from what you may consider a simple one to the most difficult. Its effectiveness depends on your situation. But one day, you may be grateful you took the time to master each one. He went on, the power of your kick doesn't necessarily come from your legs. It comes from your waist and your breathing. If you're weak here, he patted his stomach, then you're weak everywhere. I'm not saying it doesn't matter whether your legs are strong. They are like the baseball bat. We wouldn't want them to crack when you swing them around. Still, ask any baseball manager what the power hitters have over the others, and they will tell you it's not really strength. It's bat speed and timing. The speed with which you kick will come from your core strength. The timing, you will learn. She listened intently, trying to digest every word, and when perspiration began running down her forehead, he led her through some cool-down stretching. When we come back after lunch, we'll work on 1- and 2-step sparring. Somehow, she thought the afternoon would be easier than the morning, but no such luck. They started by going over all the 1-step sparring movements she knew. He then showed her several more, and he made a comment about her being a quick study, which lifted her spirits. They worked on the sparring movements for 2 solid hours. Shelley found herself breathing hard, yet Eric barely broke a sweat. We'll look into your aerobic fitness in the morning. Get some water and come right back. She obeyed. How many abdominal exercises are you doing lately? He asked. How many abdominal exercises are you doing daily? He asked when she re-entered the room. 100, she beamed. Obviously unimpressed, he made some notes on his clipboard and then stated matter-of-factly, okay, we'll up that to 200 twice a day and see if we can make some headway in that area. He'd expected an adverse reaction. He could already tell she was going to be a handful, regardless of the promises that she'd made. He almost smiled as he watched her bite her tongue. He worked her through a series of ab exercises, working each set of muscles, beginning with the lower abs, outer obliques, inner obliques, and finally the diaphragm. Shelley's muscles were burning fiercely, but she wouldn't let herself give up. She was beginning to think the torture would never end when he finally stopped. She collapsed with a moan. "It'll get easier," he reassured her. Finally, at 5, Eric decided to call it a day. "Brian has a class soon. Besides, we don't want to overdo it on the first day," he said with a grin. Shelley rolled her eyes. She felt like she'd been hit by a train and wondered what would have had to hit her had they overdone it. Back at the desk, Eric was writing again. "This," he said, handing her a piece of paper, "is what you'll eat tonight and tomorrow morning. Do you remember what I said was priority?" "Flexibility," she replied. "Right. Okay. From now on, in the morning when you arrive, you go through this series of stretches." He handed her another piece of paper with black and white pictures of a little girl in the various stretches. "You'll know these by heart soon. For now, just remember to stretch slowly. Once you've stretched, then go through all forms from white belt all the way to black belt. Twice. I know you don't know them now, but you will by the end of the day tomorrow. And if you have trouble remembering some of them, I'll be right here for you to ask. After forms, work on your first 200 abdominals, just like I showed you today. Remember, if you don't concentrate and isolate the correct muscles, the exercises will not be as effective. The same routine I just described is to be done in reverse each night beginning tonight. Remember, begin and end each day with flexibility and don't stop breathing. Got it?" She appeared completely overwhelmed, and he smiled at her. "You'll do fine. Now go home and be back here at what time?" 9 o'clock, she quipped as she headed for the door, and Eric only shook his head. New scene. Tuesday morning, as Shelley arrived at the studio, she peeked at the clock. 7:05. Eric glanced up at her from the desk where he seemed to have mounds of paperwork piling up. He looked at his watch and then back at her and then went back to work without a word. "Well, good morning to you, too," she quipped. His lips pressed tightly together. "Had you walked in 5 minutes ago, it may have been," he replied calmly. "Oh, for heaven's sakes, it's only 5 minutes," she snapped. Eric's face darkened. "Let me help you to understand. It's not the 5 minutes that matters. It's the obedience and the self-discipline that it takes to make sure you're here on time. That is what shows you have the desire, beside the fact that being late shows a lack of respect for me." The last part got to her, and she was immediately contrite. I'm sorry. And you're right. It won't happen again." "Well, don't ever make promises you can't keep," he stated. "I said I'm sorry. What more do you want?" "Well, for a start, you can give me 200 push-ups as soon as you finish your warm-up." 200? You can't be serious." Their eyes met, and the look he gave her let her know he was indeed serious. She turned away muttering and headed for the main studio to begin her stretch, and that's where the problem began. She was so stiff and sore from yesterday's activities that she found she couldn't even touch her toes. Every inch of her body screamed in protest. She tried again and again and began to worry that he'd be angry if she couldn't even force herself to do her morning routine. She pounded and rubbed her hamstrings, but they were tight as a steel drum. She groaned. Her muscles were not going to give in easily, and it was going to take quite a bit to warm up and stretch out sufficiently. "A little stiff from yesterday?" She looked up at the soft voice, a pained expression on her face. "More like a lot stiff." "I thought you would be. So I've arranged a surprise for you." He handed her a white sheet. "Go in the dressing room and get undressed and wrap this around you. You're going to get a massage." "A massage?" His smile faded. "Have you never had a massage?" She shook her head. "Well, you're in for a treat. Now go get undressed." "Completely undressed?" she asked, wide-eyed. Eric rolled his eyes at her. "Well, you can keep on your underclothing, but the oil used in the massage needs to touch your skin. It's going to help a lot with the stiffness and the soreness." She nodded and did as instructed, albeit reluctantly. When she came out, a padded, cloth-covered table was set up in the back of the studio. He patted it. She moved forward apprehensively, and he helped her up onto the table. "Shelley," Eric said, "this is Claude." Startled, she looked up to see a large man walk up to the table. "Bonjour, madame," he said in a thick French accent. Shelley nodded politely, but her eyes registered the distrust that she felt. Eric smiled. Just lay down here, on your stomach. Shelley did as ordered, and he helped her adjust her sheet to be sure she was comfortable. And Claude picked up a bottle of oil and nodded. I will not be needing vous, Arik. Merci. Eric patted Shelley's arm. Well, then I'll leave her in your hands. I'll be up front if you need me, he said as he left the room. Shelley opened her mouth to speak, but she had no chance, because Claude went to work on her right away. Wait a minute, she shrieked at him, trying to readjust her covering to be sure her body was still covered. He worked on her back and shoulders until she actually began to relax. He moved to her feet, which felt like heaven. He worked his way up her calves, speaking to her in French as he went. Her thighs were especially sore, and he seemed to take that into consideration, running his palms over her in small circles. Her muscles began to feel warm and not quite so sore to the touch. She was just starting to feel at ease when he apparently decided it was time to go deeper into the muscle, and she stiffened immediately. Ow! Oh, would you please lighten up a little, she complained. Either he wasn't listening or he didn't understand English, because the rough treatment continued. And just when she thought she could take no more, his hands went higher until they were actually under the sheet, way up under the sheet. Hold it! Stop! She grabbed the sheet and tried to turn over, but his large, strong hands held her in place, as if he were used to people trying to get out of the deep massage. She felt the panic overtake her, could feel the terror bubble up from somewhere deep inside, and the scream ripped free. The sound startled Claude enough to let her go, and she sat up, scrambling to pull the sheet around herself. He tried to motion her back down, but she screamed at him again and jumped from the table. No! You keep your hands off me! Eric came rushing into the room as Claude yelled something about a peasant. What's going on? Shelley looked at him, her eyes wide. You tell him to keep his hands off me, she cried, her voice shrill with panic. Puzzled, Eric nodded. As ridiculous as it seemed, there must be a good reason for such a strong reaction. I've never been so insulted, Claude examined. Madame, I am a professional. Eric spoke to him in apparent effortless French. Whatever he said seemed to appease the man. Claude nodded. Eric chuckled and slapped him on the shoulder, making Shelley feel awkward and childish. Without another word, Claude folded his table and gathered his supplies. Eric saw him out, leaving Shelley alone, trembling and trying to pull the sheet tighter. As she stood there thinking about what just happened, she came to some realizations. Mainly, Claude must have cost Eric a great deal of money, and Eric had been extremely thoughtful in arranging to have him here for her. And suddenly she felt very stupid and silly, and for the second time in as many days, tears welled up and spilled over. Using the tip of her sheet, she tried to blot her eyes. Here. A dark hand held up a tissue. Thank you, Shelley mumbled as she wiped her face. Eric smiled kindly and touched her hair. Why the tears? I'm sorry, she began. It's just that... She only shook her head. When Eric remained silent, her flood of jumbled emotions came tumbling out. I know you were doing something nice for me, and I ruined it all, and I know you must think I'm a real ditz, but I just couldn't stand his hands on me. I just couldn't. She stopped long enough to sniff and wipe at her eyes, muttering the next sentences between hiccups. I guess my husband was right all those times. He said I was about as uncultured and lone-bred as anyone he'd ever known. He said I couldn't do anything right, and he was right, wasn't he? I can't do anything right, not even lie still for a perfectly normal massage, and I feel like such an idiot. I'm not even sure what happened. Whoa, now, hold on. You aren't, Eric began, but she spoke over him. No, I'm an idiot, all right. I'm just realizing he was right. My husband was right, and if he was right about that, then he must have been right about everything else. When Eric tried to take her by the shoulders, she pushed away. Don't you see? She cried. When that man did what he did, my own husband said I deserved what I got. I always thought that was ludicrous. I thought he was being mean or cruel when he said that, but maybe I did. Maybe I deserved just what I got. Maybe I did bring the whole thing on myself. Slowly and gently, Eric reached out and pulled her into his arms. Okay, it's going to be okay, he murmured, rubbing her back. It's never going to be okay, she cried, burying her face against his chest as she sobbed. He said nothing more. He only held her until there were no more tears, and as he did, he thought carefully about every word she'd spoken. The mistake was completely his. She's shy and timid about her body. He should have seen that. From what he just heard, her ex-husband was at the very least verbally abusive. Years of telling someone they can't do anything right is going to leave them with serious self-esteem issues. The biggest issue, however, seems to be much larger. When that man did what he did, so something happened to her, and a sexual assault was the logical conclusion. Hot and extreme anger at that thought engulfed him so quickly he was barely able to control it. He took a deep breath and waited for the tide of fury to slowly subside. His anger was secondary to what she was feeling. Somehow he'd have to help her work through the anguish. When she was quiet, he let her go and tilted her chin up to look at him. Do me a favor and go get dressed so you're more comfortable, and then we're going to talk. Will you do that? She nodded and headed to the dressing room, a look of defeat on her face. He joined her a few minutes later on the green leather couch in the dressing room. He began by asking her about her childhood and found she was the youngest of 4 children and the only girl. She'd been disowned by her parents and her brothers when she'd become pregnant as a high school sophomore. She'd been not only a source of embarrassment, but would be a financial burden. And when Robert Adams had decided to, quote, do the right thing by her, it had been a huge relief for her family. They didn't blink twice before shipping her off, glad to be rid of the whole messy situation. Eric asked her tough questions, and she answered him honestly, baring her soul to a man she barely knew. She spoke of growing up poor, of at the age of 15 meeting her future husband, who was already a senior in college and was so distinguished and so attractive and was going to teach her about life and give her things she couldn't imagine. She told of discovering she was pregnant and the whirlwind marriage. Not once during this did she say her father or brothers tried to step in to defend her honor, and yet they had much disdain for her. Eric knew if he'd been her father, he would have had the guy arrested, that is, if he didn't kill him first. God forgive him for that thought. She spoke briefly of the birth of her daughter and then of her 2 young sons before she came to a lull. Tell me something, Shelley. You said that your ex-husband said you deserved what you got. What was it he thinks you deserved? She looked down. I said that? You did. You listen very well, don't you? He smiled kindly, waiting while she wrestled with the words. She looked up into his face and took a deep breath. I was walking on a nature trail, actually not too far from here. She went on to tell the story, appalled that her teeth began to chatter. I don't know why I didn't fight. I once read about a woman who went so far as to bite off her attacker's nose. I always thought I'd be tough like that if anything ever happened to me. But I didn't even fight. Her voice broke off as a tear ran down her cheek. You were frightened, and fear can cause paralysis, he said, the words slowly and calmly, pushing his own need to confront the man back into the recesses of his mind. He had to remind himself, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, says the Lord. Shelley shook her head to disagree. I can't use fear as an excuse because he didn't even have a weapon, and I just laid there. It was like I was watching from outside my body somewhere. I should have fought, but I just laid there. Oh, God, I should have fought. He reached for her as her sobs erupted from deep inside and overtook her, and he held her as she filled in all the details of what a man had done to her and her husband's reaction. And after listening to her story, he wondered that she could function at all. His dream, he realized, wasn't about something that would happen to her, but about something that had already happened. He sighed. He'd wanted so much to keep whatever peril awaited her from taking place. Now, the only thing he could do was to help her through the aftermath. It became clear to him that helping her to heal was why he'd been sent to her. Her emotional status would be a huge obstacle to overcome and had now become a priority. In order to compete in the mart, her mind has to be completely clear. She must be at peace. Eric had a gift for helping his students sort out their emotions and problems. His doctorate in psychology certainly helped in that area, but much greater help was his relationship with God. He knew if he couldn't get through, God could. Jesus would lead him and guide him to say and do the right things. She impressed him, though, with her persistence and with her strength she didn't even know she had, strength to remove herself from a 17-year emotionally abusive marriage, and now she strives for something above and beyond the ordinary. To him, she is remarkable. His problem, he was finding, is the more he gets to know her, the more he's tempted to think of her as a woman and not merely a student. An extraordinary woman. He organized his thoughts and took her hands in his and gave them a squeeze. Shelley, let me talk to you a minute. First, the little surprise I arranged for you this morning was totally thoughtless, and I apologize for that. Second, you certainly didn't ruin anything at all. Actually, you've given me a gift. You've shared some of your innermost thoughts and feelings with me, things that are very private, and I'm honored that you trust me with those things. Shelley sniffed and offered a small smile. You always say such nice things. You know, you're very kind and really sensitive for a man. She looked up, her eyes wide. Oh, I didn't mean that like it sounded. He was pretty sure that she most certainly meant it exactly like it sounded, and he couldn't blame her. Listen, we're going to work through these feelings as the year progresses. I'm a doctor of psychology, and I can help you if you let me. Right now, there's only one thing I want to say to you. It's something you are not going to agree with, and please know that it's not said to make you feel guilty in any way. It is something that will eventually empower you. So, for now, I just want you to think about it. Okay? She nodded. We are only victims if we allow ourselves to be. What that man did to you can hurt you only if you let it. She protested immediately, as he knew she would. I didn't allow it. I didn't ask for what he did. Oh, no, of course not. I'm not talking about No, of course not. I'm talking about how what he did affects you now. But don't you think I'd stop feeling this way if I could? Yes, if you knew how. Look, I know it's painful to you, and that's an honest feeling, and feelings are never bad. They're just feelings. We're going to work through all that pain that you're feeling. Pain has to be experienced fully, wallowed in completely, and then let go. I'm asking you to trust me. It will get better. He decided to move forward rather than dwell any longer on the subject. Excuse me. So I know it appears we've gotten off to a rough start these first few days, but it's actually a good thing to get the bad stuff over with right away. Thank you, she whispered. Thanks for putting up with everything. You're welcome, he said as he stood. Let's see if we can stretch out those sore muscles. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And that is the end of chapter 5. And I was just thinking, did I say this was chapter 4 at the beginning? I hope not. This was chapter 5.